My mum's hobbies were kind of limited, really. She loved dancing, and she and Dad used to dance. She played tennis every week. She was very artistic and did a lot of art classes, and we have a lot of her paintings on the wall. In middle life, she went to develop to do some training as a carer for mentally retarded children in a new facility that was built near us. And she had such a heart for them. And there's one little girl she used to bring home for meals, the little girl with Down syndrome. And Mum thought if she just had a bit more normality, she might really survive and do well in life. And I admired her for the heart she had for these kids. But it was difficult for her. And it was one night, I'll never forget, at the meal table, we were talking about things, and all of a sudden she just started to weep. And that definitely was not my mum. She just started to sob. I feel guilty because it was such a shock. I was just a young teenager that I sort of started to giggle. You know, that's things you do when inappropriately you giggle. Anyway, it turned out, it was difficult for her, inevitably, because she had left school at the age of 14. She was from a poor family. All the girls had to leave school, get a job in a shop and contribute to the family income. She'd met Dad dancing. She was a great dancer in Fremantle, and Dad, Navy man, swept her off her feet sort of thing. I know they were happy when they were young and unhappy when Dad went through his depression and alcoholism phase. And I admire Mum for sticking with Dad. I know you can say there weren't many options for women in those days, but she also stuck with Dad. And then they kind of went through a U-bend where they were terrific, and then Dad had his downtime, but then they came up. And a remarkable thing happened when Dad got over his depression and attempted suicide and had therapy, and he became much more the dad that we were used to for most of our life. They went off on a trip around Australia while I was up in Papua New Guinea working. And I honestly thought, oh no, to get two of them together in a car for 3 months, this is going to be a nightmare. Well, I kept getting postcards up in New Guinea, and they were clearly happy. Mum would write about the beautiful sunsets and the great time they were having, and Dad would write his half of the postcard, which was about how many miles per gallon they'd done and exactly where they'd been and how many miles in those, kilometres probably in those days that they'd covered. But I thought, this sounds better than I expected. When I got home, they were like Darby and Joan again, and they lived for another 22 years together, travelling and had a beautiful life. It's that classic U-bend where if you stick with it, not everybody, but for Mum and Dad, it was a classic U-bend where it went down and then back up again. I mentioned elsewhere that when her father, Pop, died, she was profoundly depressed for a few months, and Mum was never that sort of person, and I was shocked. I was probably in my teens, late teens, and I saw Mum just dragging herself around. I'd never seen grief like that, never seen grief. She was such a quietly happy and loving person. Since then, of course, I've realised the relationship between a daughter and a dad, and I know that my pop, William Beale, adored his kids, but especially his two daughters, and Mum was the recipient of a huge amount of love and admiration from her father, which helped to make her the well-balanced and lovely person that she was. All of that's been well described. And that relationship between Mum and her father helped make her the person she was. And, I've written a book about daughters and dads, and I do understand that. And therefore I understand the grief. But better to have loved and lost. And she came out of it, and, of course, we've all benefited from her father and ultimately his impact on Mum. She was a deeply loving person, but she was also quietly wise. So a couple of things. Few things. Firstly, she met Dad in Fremantle, where she used to dance in the local place, and he was in Fremantle because he was in the Navy. And she, of course, used to dance with the American sailors, etc., who spent a lot of time in Perth during the war. And there's one guy who actually proposed to her, and she had a photo of him with his name and etc. in her glory box, which we found after she died. And but apparently she said to him, well, he said, well, you come and live with me in Cleveland. And she said, well, why would I want to do that? I've got a lovely family here and everybody I know. I'm not going to go and live in America, a place where I don't even know anybody. So she called it off.